All right, this is not a prepared statement. Uh, I tried this video now 2 times, and both times the phone died or didn't have enough space. So I'm going to try it one more time. Third time's the charm. See if we get it this time. I took that as I took those as signs that I needed to do it again. So something's going to come through that's going to be helpful to someone, I'm sure. I wanted to talk about how I got into A Course in Miracles, and someone had written a question. How did I get into it? And this is the short version, the long version of how I got into A Course in Miracles. And I'm gonna name names, and it's gonna get ugly here in a minute. No, I'm kidding. But some people, I don't know if I'm going to tag people or what I'm going to do with this video, but basically what happened with me is I was on the spiritual search, as we all are on some level or another. Everyone has their timeline as far as spirituality goes, or some kind of seeking some kind of deeper understanding of life. Let's put it that way. You don't have to call it a spiritual search per se, especially if you're an atheist or whatever you may be. But for me, I was first I got into philosophy. That led me into, then I had a spiritual awakening when I was 19. That led me into trying to understand what that was all about, and I got into spirituality, and then I got into religion. I went to Israel, and I stayed there for a couple of years, and I learned Torah, and I learned Hebrew and Aramaic, and I studied the Bible, the Torah, the Jewish sources. Then I went back to the States, and I got into the comparative religion at Penn, University of Pennsylvania. I got an MA, and then I got I started to work toward the PhD. I did not finish the PhD. I switched to New York University, where I was studying Kabbalah. And at the same time, I had been introduced to yoga, and I was getting deeply into yoga through some teachers from India, some women teachers that were taking me really where I wanted to go with yoga, which is to answer these deep existential questions that I had. And 10 years later, I got into plant medicine. 10 years after that, I got into A Course in Miracles when I was early 40s. This was in 2012, maybe 2013. I think it was 2012, probably. I was in Bali, and I was leading a teacher training, and I was having a difficult time because the guy I was working with there, we were not getting along, and I was getting upset. I had this book that I had been carrying with me for some years, and I always thought, I'll read that at some point, maybe. And finally, on this trip, I opened the book, I cracked the book, I just read fairly randomly, and I started, and I thought, oh, wow, this is interesting. So then I began the book from the beginning. And what was the book? The book was Gary Renard's The Disappearance of the Universe. And I ended up reading the entire thing on that trip to Bali. I was there for about a month. I remember on the holiest day of the year in Bali, which is where no one does anything, it's all quiet. It's kind of like the equivalent of Yom Kippur in Bali. I was reading, of course, I was reading the Disappearance of the Universe, and finding it really helpful for me at that moment in time, especially with this whole thing about how to get along with your brother, right? And how to let go of stuff. I have been on this path for years now. I've been into yoga, plant medicine. I was learning all these things, and yet I was not I was still finding myself in these kinds of situations. So Gary's book was helping, and I reached out to Gary at that point. I sent him a message on Facebook, and I said, I think I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life, Course in Miracles. And Gary wrote me a nice message back. And then we started to, just briefly back and forth about the possibility of him doing a talk at some point, maybe in Hawaii, because I knew his connection with Maui, and I had been on Maui. So I said, maybe we'll hook up in Maui sometime and collaborate on something. And he was like, yeah. And then what happened was I began to look online to see what people were saying about Gary's book. Bad thing to do. No. What I found was I quickly found Robert Perry's Circle of Atonement stuff. Robert Perry had written some stuff. He had written an article, and then John Mundy, he actually had a newsletter that came out where he wrote an article, John Mundy wrote an article, several other people wrote critiques of Gary's book, and some of the things that they said were basically bullshit. Gary's bullshitting you. He made this story up. He took Ken Wapnick's ideas and he made a story around what he learned from Ken Wapnick. There's nothing really new in what Gary put in his book. It's all basically a rehash of Ken Wapnick's teachings. And at that moment, I kind of took a step back, and I even, I think, wrote to Gary and I said, well, I'm not sure now about the collaboration, because I read these things. And actually Cindy, his wife, wrote back to me, and she wrote something. She included the thing from the clarification of terms in A Course in Miracles that says, those who seek clarity will find it, and those who seek controversy are going to find that. As a way of saying that you have to go beyond the controversy. And I think that the implication for me and what I got from that was, if the book was helpful for you, and if the book led you to A Course in Miracles, it served its purpose. That was the unwritten thing that she was saying, and I guess Gary was saying as well. And I think that's that's something to think about. And there was still a part of me that was like, I would not have gotten that deeply into this book if I did not think on some level that Gary's story was true. And on some level, I wanted it to be true. I thought that maybe it could be true. And I'm going to give Gary the benefit of the doubt. I know that some people out there listening to this will be like, oh, you poor sucker. You think that that's true. I think it's important to give everyone the benefit of the doubt. And the reality is Gary has stuck to his story, and he's been very, as far as I'm aware, he has not let on that he made the story up. I've talked to other people that believe either he really really had this experience with these two ascended masters showing up in his living room, Arten and Pursa, or perhaps it was based on inspiration on his part, on some level. So let's just, I'm not here to judge Gary, and this is not for controversy, this is for clarification. I will say I was upset, feeling duped, feeling like Gary is, what other people have said, that Gary is a fraud, that this is like fraudulent activity in the world of A Course in Miracles. Gary is leading people astray, or he's lying to people. He's giving them this lie, and he's getting them to buy his books, and he's making a name off of a lie, basically. And he is promoting his version and Ken Wapnick's version of A Course in Miracles. And in so doing, he is not playing fair. And he was even, he did not mention Robert Perry by name in Disappearance, but I believe he was talking about Robert Perry quite a bit. He was talking about this guy that was getting on everyone's nerves and was thought he knew everything and was this know-it-all about A Course in Miracles. It's pretty clearly Robert Perry. So I'm not necessarily going to go into all that right now. Maybe I will get into it more later. But one thing that Gary said in the book was, I'm paraphrasing, but he had his the Ascended Masters, and I don't want to say he made it up, but the Ascended Masters in the book said that one day Ken Wapnick will be understood to be the preeminent teacher of A Course in Miracles. All right, this is not well understood now, but it will be eventually. Ken Wapnick apparently said that one day the Course will be as popular or as widely read as the Bible. I don't know what millennia he was thinking, but it's the Course right now is widely read, but is it more widely read than the Bible? I don't know. I don't think a lot of people actually read A Course in Miracles, or just like they don't read the Bible. Who does? But there is a small minority of people that are really, that really study and really engage with these things. I'm trying to do that on this channel, and this video is part of that. This video is part of the deep engagement with A Course in Miracles. So anyway, what I want to say is, then I started to listen to Ken's stuff, Ken Wapnick, and I was, very taken with his presentation of A Course in Miracles. And with both Ken and Gary, I love the humor. And I will say this about Gary's book, which is a point that Gary made, and others have made as well, is that Gary's book is fun. Gary's book brings A Course in Miracles down to earth for the average Joe and makes it into an interesting, fun, even entertaining presentation. Whereas many of the books out there on A Course in Miracles are dry, boring, and most people like me would not pick them up. So would I have ever gotten into A Course in Miracles if it were not for Gary's book? I don't know. The fact is that I started reading his book somewhere in the middle when I was in Bali, and then I was like, wow, this is interesting. And then I started to read it from the beginning. So that's the point I want to make there is that Gary's book, say what you will, but you could say that maybe it is a lie based in, a fib, but maybe it serves a greater purpose, which is to present the content, of the Course, which is the escape from fear and guilt and all the things that go with it, and direct people to the real alternative, which is A Course in Miracles, and the alternative to the ego thought system and ego-based religion, which is a mixed bag generally, where God is sometimes loving and kind and merciful and so on, and sometimes God destroys and is wrathful and vengeful and jealous and zealous and all the other things. Not a nice dude. So Gary's book, maybe it doesn't matter if it's true per se. I think that's the thing. And if you look at religion, and I'm going to put this out, I'm going to say something about this in another video, but as I look at it, as I start to look into these things more and more deeply, I really feel that most religion is based in mythology, not in historical truth, not in literal historical truth, but allegory. It's allegorical. It's symbolic. It it tells the truth in there's a great saying, just because it didn't happen doesn't mean it ain't true. Sometimes these stories, they're not true, but they tell the truth in a way that we can learn from and that we would not necessarily listen to if it was just presented in a factual, literal way, right? Like, yeah, God made the world and people didn't follow God and got on the outs with God and blah, 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 blah. The story of Adam and Eve and the serpent that's a cool story. That's an interesting story. There's a lot there, it's juicy. Can you say that for all these different scholars and thinkers and so on, they tend to get heady and dry and very academic and not very down to earth and not making it, bringing it to the people. So Gary's book does that. And I think, I kind of think that Gary, he puts on this facade of being, he's this average Joe. He's a stupid guy. He's basically, a dumbass. He doesn't know his ass from a hole in the ground or whatever. And, he couldn't possibly make this shit up. But Gary is a very intelligent, he must have a very high IQ. Anyway, I don't want to, I'm not here to make a judgment again. I really don't know what happened with this whole thing. I'm just saying that I'm presenting my bias. First of all, I got into the course through Gary and Ken, and then I started to listen to everyone else, and I would say the truth is somewhere in between, right? I don't think anyone has the final say on what A Course in Miracles is. I will say, though, that I think that people do tend to take sides, and there are these different camps. And the problem is when we stop listening to the other side, when we stop really listening to what they have to say. That goes for A Course in Miracles, and it goes for everything else. You really want to engage with other people's way of seeing things, even if you think they're wrong, and look at your own bias in light of what they are saying. So I would say that to people who are against Ken Wapnick, because there seem to be, quite a lot of people in the world of A Course in Miracles who don't like Ken for whatever reason. And I know that I've heard some of the reasons why. But when you do that and you make him you demonize him, or you make him wrong in whatever way you make him wrong, or you say that he did not fully get the Course and he did not whatever about the Course, then you stop listening. And I think that's a mistake, because Ken taught it for 30 years. He was there at the beginning, 40 years of his life with A Course in Miracles. Most of his, more than half of his life was spent studying and teaching A Course in Miracles. He was there almost at the beginning with Helen and Bill. Not really at the beginning, but, he was there with Helen and Bill for a good 4 years doing the editing process with them, 72 to 76, as I understand it. And then, he was with them after that too. That's a long time to spend with the original, scribes of A Course in Miracles. And to not listen to what Ken has to say, I think is a big mistake. Big mistake. And I think that Ken was getting at, this thing of all are called, but few choose to listen. And why do people not go all the way with the Course is because they stop listening. And I think you need to listen to the brother that you really can't have a hard time listening to, that you're resisting listening to that brother because you have something against them. I'm saying this about Ken, but I'm also saying this about people that follow Ken that don't listen to like Robert Perry or anyone else, because Robert Perry, he has a lot of great things to say about A Course in Miracles as well. He's got a lot of insights and and all the teachers do. That's the reality is that everyone has something that they're bringing to the table. So what else do I want to say about this? I wrote a book. I was writing a book when I first got into A Course. I was writing a book called Who Am I? Yoga, Psychedelics, and the Quest for Enlightenment. It was published, I believe, in 2016. I self-published it, and I actually sent it to Gary because I had written some stuff about Gary and Disappearance of the Universe and A Course in Miracles, and Gary wrote me something nice about it. He wrote something very nice about it. And it was something like, I've never done any psychedelics or anything. I don't know anything about that, but this book is cool. And then I also sent it to John Mundy, who he and Gary were, not on good terms at that point. John Mundy also wrote something nice. And basically what happened was I put both of their blurbs in, at the beginning of the book, of my book. So they were both on the same page, basically. Gary Renard and John Mundy saying nice things about my book. I want to just say something. I really think that book is good. It's called Who Am I? It's on Amazon. It does have a chapter where I go into how I got into A Course in Miracles and how A Course in Miracles helped me to understand psychedelics, especially ayahuasca. It helped in the process. And I'm gonna do more videos on that soon. But I think that one thing that I will say, I really feel that for some people like myself, they will understand A Course in Miracles that much better with the help of something like ayahuasca, because ayahuasca reveals aspects of the mind that we're not usually aware of. For example, people like myself have the experience of being in hell and seeing no way out and seeing no end. It's like eternal hell, experiencing eternal hell, eternal damnation in the psychedelic experience or the ayahuasca experience. I've had that, and I've seen other people have that. When you have that experience, the Course in Miracles starts to make a lot more sense. Like and it also is like Jesus is reaching out his hand and saying, you think there's no hope, but there is hope, right? You think there's no way out, but there is a way out. There is a way out. I know you are suffering. I know, because I was there myself. I know what that feels like, to be in that intense despair, depression, hopelessness, even feeling damned, even feeling like, what's the purpose of anything? Even worse than that.